Story 1. My cousin went for a walk once. He was dating this woman who was just an awful human being. She got pregnant, swore it was his, and once the kid was born, the state went after him for child support, as he wasn't on the birth certificate, even though they were living together. Anyways, the paternity test came back showing it wasn't his, and she flipped her lid, just lost it. He asked her to calm down and said he wanted to take a walk to cool off. He left everything he owned, minus the clothes on his back and his wallet, and went for a walk that he never came back from. A few years back, the kid found him. He was 16 or 17, and went on some giant rant about him being a bum and a punk ass and whatever other nonsense. My cousin told him he wasn't his dad. The paternity test showed that. And he had no idea why she told him he was the father and then abandoned them. Kid left a whole hell of a lot more confused than when he showed up, I think. Story 2. I grew up in foster care, and all the homes I lived in either were abusive or run in a business format, collecting cash to house kids. My actual mom was a very heavy drinker and was abusive, hence being in foster care. As adults, we had a very good relationship. She was proud of me, impressed with my work ethic, and amazed that I got fully paid for education via scholarships at the state university. Everything was going swimmingly, until I started to do better than my immediate family. They started to think I had abandoned them, and that I was too good for them once I started pursuing my education. The last conversation I had with my mother and sisters occurred on Thanksgiving 2011, when I drove 3 hours to sit down and have our first legitimate family dinner in several years. I showed up, my mom was drunk, and my sisters were incoherently intoxicated on narcotics. My sisters yelled at me for abandoning the family and called me unforgivable things. My mother said to me, "I hope you achieve all your dreams. Lord knows you've abandoned ours." I got up from dinner and left. I spent the entire drive back for 3 hours hysterically sobbing. I haven't talked with them since. I know it was bitterness and the drugs talking, but it really shattered me to the core. My mother passed away this last year. That dinner was the last time I ever saw her or spoke with her. Both of my sisters were incarcerated at the time, so I flew home to clear out her estate. She didn't have anything but a mountain of bills and a house full of items to sort through. I donated almost all of it to Goodwill. While sifting through her belongings, I did find a lockbox, though. The lockbox contained her wedding ring from my late father and some photos of my sisters and I as kids, perfectly preserved. It also had a single note inside, which was addressed to all three of us, with corresponding paragraphs dedicated to us. My paragraph said, "Daniel, words cannot describe how sorry I am for how much I've hurt you. It has eaten at me every day for the last 10 years. I drank because I wish I could have been the mother you deserved. You are the strongest man I have ever met. I'm sorry. You deserve so much more than I gave you. I love you with all my heart. I hope someday you can forgive me. Mom." It destroys me inside to know that Mom died thinking that she didn't mean the world to me. If I'm being honest, I started drinking very heavily after she passed. She died thinking I didn't love her with all my heart. I carry her driver's license in my wallet, above mine, so that every time I take it out, I get to see her. But more importantly, so that she can see me and know that I'm always right here. Anyway, that's my story, Reddit. Thanks for reading. Story 3. I have never left, but my brother has. One morning, 2 years ago, I woke up with a killer hangover. Rolled over in bed, checked my phone, and saw several missed calls and a couple of voicemails from my mother and sister, along with a text message from my dad saying, "Call me." The first voicemail was from my sister, sobbing through the phone. She said, "For the sake of the story, let's call my brother Tom. Tom just tried to commit suicide. He wrote us all a letter and just call me, please." Whoa, this cannot be real. Then my mom's voicemail. "Tom attempted to off himself last night. We haven't been able to reach him, but we suspect he might be heading your way. If you see him, call the police. We need to make sure he's safe." Oh, crap, this is definitely real. We all somewhat suspected depression from him, but this was unexpected. Anyways, I got out of bed and put some clothes on. I open the blinds and I peek out the window, and as if on cue, Tom's crappy old '96 four-door. He was flustered, barely spoke to me, but told me he was leaving for California. Refusing to turn him into the police, I bought him lunch, filled up his gas tank, and then I gave him all of the $26 I had on me and wished him the best of luck. He was back home within 2 weeks, remorseful and embarrassed. I'm glad he's back. Story 4. Mom cornered me in the bathroom after chasing me around the house. Told me to punch her when I tried to leave. Punched me instead. I said I'd call the cops. She said she'd do the same as she's done with my ex-stepdad. Tell him I punched her and it'd be her word versus mine. Next morning, I got into a broken Ford that was still on her name, even though it was mine. I went to get the oil changed. Asked the guy how long he thinks the car could make it. He said I'd be lucky to make it a block. Wouldn't go into reverse, among many other things. All the same, I thought, I'm only going forward. 3 days later, I drove from California to Maryland and spent about 5 years without contact. Reconnected, foolishly thinking people change. People don't change. Last I heard from her, she wanted me to sign over my apartment in Russia so she could sell it and give me the money. I told her I'd happily sign it over, but she didn't need to pretend she'd give me a dime. Like one of the top commenters here, I've also been working since the age of 12, albeit for much less than 8 hours when I started, paper route. Only reconnected because I have sisters, but the brainwashing she's done against me is done. Both sisters are suicidal. One is pregnant at the age of 18, failing grades, and neither will take me up on my offers to help. I make 50 plus an hour tutoring strangers. I'm the pariah who left and traveled the world, but I'm a loser because, well, story 5. Parents were split and absolutely hated each other and would always put me in the middle. The drugs and alcohol they were both doing didn't help either. Got kicked out of each of their places and went back and forth over some crappy circumstances involving them wanting all of my money to live with them, then playing the guilt card on each other that they took me in while the other kicked me out. Got a steady retail job that I had to work 6 to 7 days a week at odd hours to get full time. 2 weeks before Christmas, Mom said her place wasn't a truck stop and I couldn't come and go at all hours of the night and that I had to leave. Heard similar from her before and didn't want to go to Dad's again, so I called some family and they all refused to take me in because my mom had called and told them I hit her. Since I was still in the same house, I told her she was a horrible person, but an even worse mother, and left. Grandma knew my parents were crazy, so she helped me as much as she could. I still get phone calls, emails, Facebook messages, etc., asking me when I'm going to stop being a bitch so we can be a family again. Haven't seen both since. Invited some friends through Facebook to things that they in turn invited my parents to. Finally nutted up and told them both to get the F out of my life. Mom still leaves me drunk, high, or crying voicemails in the middle of the night, either telling me she loves me or that I'm all that's wrong with her life. Dad sends me emails telling me to get the stick out of my ass because I'm still his son. Still spend time with my grandma. Friends' parents mean more to me than mine ever did. Now I've got a full-time job, an awesome dog, working on doing better in life in general, and trying to move into a place by myself. Blood is not thicker than water. Will never speak to either of them again if I can help it. No regrets. Story 6. I was living with a very mean and controlling girlfriend. If it wasn't her way or all about her, she threw a fit. One day, I had enough and said I was going to the store and just kept driving. I literally drove for 12 hours and showed up at a friend's house 5 states away and asked if I could crash on his couch. I called my boss and said I wanted to quit work. He was pretty cool about it. He knew my girlfriend and actually set me up with a job in my new city. I have never spoken to my ex since. Soon after my relocation, I met my wife, and I could not be in a better relationship. Best thing I ever did. Story 7. Lived in an abusive house with my mom. Got a job after college and in 3 months rented an apartment and went home. Took a garbage bag full of clothes and booked it. She didn't want me to leave because she was talking about all of my money. She would take my car when I didn't pay her my full paycheck. I had to resort to pulling fuses when I parked because she would hide my car on different streets trying to get me fired. Even in college, I had finals to graduate and took my car, and I had no way to get there. Had to rent a car just to take my finals. The stories I could tell. Anyway, I waddled in the apartment with my garbage bag and nothing else, slept on the floor, and for the first time, felt peace. Now I have a decent job, house, wife, and a kid. Story 8. I ran away from my family. My mom and whatever family is attached to. I feel so much better. I resented the bullcrap my mom would pull on me. She once got me pretty screwed around and told everyone I was abusing her and her finances. She told me to my face that she was going to lie and get away with it. And she did. And that was pretty much the family dynamic I was caught up in. When I called her an abuser, she could not handle it. It felt good to leave and not look back. I got a new job, a new place, and changed numbers. Story 9. I was left. My dad and my mom had a fight. My dad left. Then he offed himself. On one hand, I have no memories of him. I was too young. And I am very sympathetic to mental illness and suicidal ideation. I've had bouts of serious depression in my life. On the other hand, his absence, the lack of a dad, left a huge gaping hole in my life. The strangest part is, when I turned the age he was when he offed himself. I'm 36, and I'm older than my dad ever was. And I still feel young, like I have a lot of years ahead of me. I wish I had the opportunity to know him. Everything I know about him is someone else's memory. Story 10. I don't know if this counts, but when I was about 19, I was in a very crappy position. All of my friends were doing meth regularly. I had put out thousands of dollars to bail friends from jail and to try to help them out. The girl I was dating was lying to everyone. She knew about our relationship. My uncle called me in the middle of all of this and offered me a job on the other side of the country. I had my car packed and was headed there within 12 hours. I heard from the girl I was dating about 2 weeks later. She called me crying, telling me she went to my house and I wasn't there and wanted to know where I was. I told her I had moved, and she told me it wasn't my choice to make, that I should have consulted her first. I never heard from any of the people I had considered friends. I heard some of them went to jail, some had kids, and some disappeared. I moved back to the town I left about 5 years later, and everything has been relatively okay since then. Sometimes I see people I used to know, and sometimes they recognize me. But mostly, I keep to myself and spend time with better people than those I left years ago. Story 11. Throw away for good reason. I've always lived in an abusive home, both mentally and physically, and never saw a proper way out. I started working at 14 years old in a convenience store for $8 an hour, and I hid all of the money I made in a locked container in a nearby wooded park. I did this because my parents would have taken my money if they even knew I was working. By the time I turned 18, I had close to $10,000 saved up and had finished high school. I was supposed to start university that year, but early on in the summer, I waited until my parents went out to work, found and took all of my documents, unrolled out of the university program I was supposed to be in, and left. I took a bus to Alberta, and I've been living here ever since, doing labor. It's been a year and a half, and they haven't even searched for me yet. Not that I'm aware of, at least. How is my life now? I'm poor, barely getting by, but at least I'm living alone and happier than I was before. Story 12. Left my family close to 5 years ago to move to California to start a new life. I was 400 pounds, living a lifestyle of prescription drugs and drinking at 17 with my family. I was good in high school and even went to college early, but wasn't able to secure a loan there to continue past the first year. Dropped my life there and came here. It was very rough for a time, but I'm a lot better now. I had some help from my adoptive father, but paid my way, aside from the ticket here. I live on my own now and manage an office selling printer parts and various other moneymakers online. I started my own business last year and have been paying out of pocket to continue school here, because the college I went to back home wouldn't release my transcript. I have lost a great deal of weight and am away from unhealthy addictions. My family is, for the most part, very cross with me. My mother died almost exactly 2 years ago. I had planned to go back for her birthday, tomorrow incidentally, in 2013, but she died 2 weeks prior to it. The only regret I have is leaving that door open. I like to think she'd be proud of where I went. Story 13. My father just walked out on us when I was 9, walked out on everything, racked up a load of debt before he went without my mother knowing, through a gambling habit he had which we didn't even know about until immediately after, and the hounding from the people and companies he'd borrowed money from. Some of them were the kinds of people you didn't really want to owe money to, and the next few years were kind of rough. To add on to that, my mother got sick around the same time and ended up unable to leave her bed for a few years. I think the illness was caused, or at least exacerbated, by the shock of his leaving. Not going to lie, it was really rough. I ended up getting homeschooling, as they were afraid that he'd show up and pick me up from school one day, and after a little while of that, my confidence was so drained that I avoided school as much as possible. Police were looking for him and eventually found him after a year or two in a town 200 miles away. But he didn't want to get in contact with anyone, and nothing ever came of it. He was an ex-policeman, so I'm guessing he knew what to say, or something like that. Then, a few years later, we got a phone call from a lady who had found his address book, informing us that he had died, and she was looking for his next of kin. It ended with us traveling to where he had been staying, to find an elderly lady he was basically bleeding dry financially. Some of the stories he'd been spinning to manipulate people were incredible. People there thought of him as a hero. He told them about how he'd started a new life after nursing his sick wife with cancer until she passed away. How my brother had been inspired by his story and was working as a doctor abroad, and in his fantasy, I never actually existed. I can't really say I'm angry about it. I grew up afraid that I'd end up just like him, but I think when you're exposed to something like that as a child, you can either see it as an example of how to live, or you can look at it and do everything in your power to avoid becoming it. Story 14. I was 21, in my third year of college, getting drunk and high on pills every single night, puking every single morning. Guy after random guy. Had just had an abortion, 98 pounds and barely scraping by in my classes. One day, I woke up and felt so unbelievably sick and tired of the way I was living, I considered ending my life. Instead of offing myself, I packed up as much as I could fit in my car while my housemates were in class or work and moved to North Carolina to live by the beach. I called my parents and told them what I was doing, which broke their hearts, which broke my heart. I still come home for some holidays. I stayed in a cheap, disgusting motel for 2 months before I saved enough money at my waitress job to get an apartment 40 minutes from the beach. I'm currently married to a wonderful man, completely sober, finished my degree, and have a baby due in December. I can truly say that I'm happy. Story 15. I left my abusive husband 7 years ago. I just walked out the door. I never spoke to him again. I had squirreled away money for years because he controlled my income. He had this idea that I was miserable because we didn't have children, so he tried to change that by raping me so I would get pregnant. He had no idea I was using birth control. I had resigned from my job, so I just left. I could not bring children into that life. I went to live with my parents in a different part of the country. Now, I live in a different country. I have a kind and loving partner, and we have a daughter. I'm happy most of the time. My family doesn't tell people where I live, in case he finds out. I don't know what happened to him. I hope he's dead.